Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel for the latest installment in our ongoing new figure showcase series. And the goal here is really to take a look at a more recent release that I'm picking up from my collection, and we'll do a quick review looking at some key aspects of the figure and then pose it up. Now, today's installment is one I'm very excited for, as we'll be taking a look at a hugely iconic character, and that is Blondie, the Clint Eastwood character from the spaghetti western trilogy of movies, where he portrayed a cowboy known as the man with no name, or as Tuco refers to him in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Blondie. So I'll try not to bore you too much with my take on these, which is hard because these movies, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, A Fistful of Dollars, and A Few Dollars More, were ones that I was introduced to when I was younger, and to a degree they spurred on my interest in film. Granted, when my father would watch these as a younger kid, to me they seemed boring, but as I grew up and kept watching them, I got to appreciate them more and more. And look, my dad grew up in the golden age of westerns, right? So he was watching those older John Wayne movies, but even he'll admit there was a switch when the spaghetti Sergio Leone westerns came out. And all of a sudden, that clean feel of those older movies gave way to something grittier. And if you watch these movies, especially The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, while we're rooting for Blondie and Tuco too to a degree, let's be honest, none of these characters are shining pillars of heroism. In The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Blondie and Tuco are running cons. They're not great to each other, and they're all trying to find the stolen gold. So let's focus on the man with no name, Clint Eastwood himself, because while this figure seems to be intended as a representation of his appearance in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the wrist guard he comes with is from one of the other movies in the trilogy. But even so, the character. Clint Eastwood in these movies exuded cool, control, and charisma. There was just a swag that he carried. Not entirely carefree, but someone very much in control. And his interactions with Tuco in particular. He has some great one-liners and pulls off some amazing moments where even in defeat, he comes out on top. If you haven't watched this movie, I would highly recommend it, so you can see why it's considered one of Clint's iconic roles. And even though he did some great westerns beyond this, right? Pale Rider, Unforgiven, more recently, right? Josie Wales, High Plains Drifter, Hang 'em High, I still feel like the Dollars trilogy really established him in westerns and honestly changed the style of that genre. Okay, so enough on that. We're here to look at the figure. And first thing, this is one of 3 or 4 recent Blondie figures. Sideshow is killing it right now with the Clint Legacy line, and Present Toys released the full trio. As did Redman Toys, I believe, and there is another Blondie still scheduled to come out, although I don't recall who's making that one. Now, normally, I would go licensed. I just personally feel like licensed figures almost always tend to be better in terms of quality and so on. What drove me to go with Present Toys here was that they were doing the full trio from the movie, and I wanted to get all of them to represent this property in my display. So let's look at the set we're getting here. And besides the figure, you are getting some decent accessories. First of all, you're getting 2 sculpts, which we'll look more closely at a little bit later. And then you get 2 rifles, 2 revolvers, a set of spare hands, a display stand that identifies him as West Cowboy, a cigar which is super small, so I have to be careful not to lose it, and then some accessories including a bandana and his classic poncho. So not bad overall, and it feels like a decent amount of pieces to give us some variety of posing options. And also, this is my first Present Toys pickup, so I'm curious to get a feel for them as a company with these, since they do have a lot of figures incoming that I have ordered. So let's dive into the accessories in more detail, and we'll start with the hands. Nothing really groundbreaking here. They look okay, and basically they're functional. They're also a softer plastic, which I appreciate at times because there is an ease in placing of the accessories, so you don't have to worry too much about breaks. But I'm not going to tell you these are amazing. They're just functional. Don't expect in-art or damn toys quality here. Next up, you get the 2 rifles, and while I love the movies, I haven't watched them in a few years, so I should go back and rewatch, and apologies if I get this wrong. But the top rifle, I think, is the one that he uses at the end of the movie, when he has Tuco strung up with a noose around his neck and shoots the rope from a distance, right, to kind of stop him from following him. And I think it's called a Spencer 1860. Well, the one on the bottom with the gold is a Winchester that Clint uses earlier in the movie, and also one he uses in For a Few Dollars More. So both pieces look good. They don't have quite the detail that we get from other companies. For weaponry, to me, Damn Toys and Easy and Simple are at the top of the list in terms of what they give you. So don't expect that level of detail. But there's a decent job here recreating the wood grain and the paint apps for the metal barrels and triggers. What's unfortunate, especially with the Spencer, is that you can't toggle up the sight, which would have been nice to recreate that final shot that Clint takes, but serviceable overall. Next, you get two revolvers. Now again, apologies if I get this wrong, but the one on top is accurate to the movie, as Clint uses a Colt Navy with a distinctive snake on the grip. Now these pieces do articulate a little bit with a rotating drum and a hammer that can be pulled back, so I like that, and the Colt is actually really nicely done. Paintwork is solid, although I think the one in the movie has a little more gold to it. The one on the bottom, I don't recall Blondie using this one in the movie at all. Maybe it's from one of the other films in the trilogy, but it looks okay. Gets you a nice alternate. I mean, part of me thinks they were trying to do Angel Eyes Remington from the end of the movie, but the front of the gun is all wrong. So not bad, but not sure about accuracy to Blondie or the film. Now next you have a few accessories, with the first being a very small cigar that's meant to be used with the sculpt that has the molded hat. Super small, so I'm just trying to keep an eye on it to avoid having it get lost. And then you get saddlebags that have really nice detail work with the straps holding them together, and the buckles and the side bags themselves. And finally you get that wrist guard, which again I think is more accurate to his appearance and for a few dollars more. So I think Present Toys was trying to give you a figure that could be used for multiple movies. And final key accessory is his poncho, which he uses in every single movie from the trilogy. And that is key and immediately identifies him from these films. Now, a quick plug here. My buddy Tony Marine did a video on his sideshow version and spent a lot of time on the poncho, so I'll throw in a link in the description, but he made it look really great on his figure, so I'm definitely going to be looking at that, because to me it was a little challenging to get it to look just right. But fabric here and pattern all look nice. I do think the strands along the edges may be a little too long, but not bad overall. So accessories, pretty solid overall. Now let's get to the figure, and we'll start with sculpts. I have seen the pics of the sideshow version, and I think he turned out great, but as I don't own it, I can't really compare. But looking at the sculpt without the hat, I think it's actually really solid effort. It's not perfect, but I don't think you could deny that this is Clint. Although I do think Present Toys maybe went a little too far with the wrinkles. He definitely looks older than he did in the movie, and the eyes might be a tad too far apart. But for a third-party company, not a bad effort at all, and I'm definitely happy with it. Plus, the detail work and paint apps are overall pretty solid, so no major complaints from me here. Now, looking at the second sculpt, first observation, I think the hat is too high on his head. You can see in the screenshot from the movie that he actually wears it lower and tipped forward. It isn't bad, but I kind of feel like it makes things look a little bit off. Also, the eyes on this one are kind of staring in a weird direction. Paintwork is solid on them, but I don't know, it just, again, feels a little off, and it's throwing something off for me. I can definitely still see Clint here, but this one is a little disappointing, especially because when you think about these movies, I'd be more inclined to display the figure with the hat and the cigar. But right now, the other sculpt definitely feels superior. Now, overall figure, not bad. Actually, it's pretty solid. Is it completely accurate? I don't think so. The gun belt, for example, here is a very light colored leather, while the one in the movie matches his belt more with the darker tan leather. But looking at this, he looks great with the blue shirt, the vest with the wool lining, and the boots look pretty excellent. And I love that they were able to add in the spurs and make them look pretty decent for something so small. And then once you add in the poncho, he looks great. But the issue I have here, those hanging strands are way too long. I may need to look into trimming those because they kind of look ridiculous once they're actually on the figure. And look, third party, you get what you pay for, right? So you have to acknowledge that it won't be perfect. And things can range from amazing to downright bad. I'll tell you that overall, this one is definitely, it's not amazing, but it's definitely an overall positive figure, and I'm happy with it. And even with the negatives that I pointed out, it still turned out pretty well. I do wish I had picked up the sideshow one just for a more accurate screen version, but I'm happy with what I got. Now let's talk about some of the other issues. Like I said, figure looks good overall. Body chosen does feel a little bit more delicate, so I'm trying to be careful when posing to avoid breaking anything. But so far so good, and he does stand well on his own. Hands are okay, and because they are a softer plastic, swapping them out is really straightforward, which for me is always a plus, as you can avoid the heat gun or dunking these in water. My one nitpick here, the kind that it really bugs me actually, is how pronounced the pegs are, because they're more plastic, and they kind of stand out in certain poses and become a bit of an eyesore. Now, not a deal breaker overall, and I will give them credit, they do actually allow for some great posing, especially coupled with the double jointed elbows. Just overall, I wish they had at least done something else with the pegs from a paint app point of view to hide them, but that is a lot to ask from a third-party company. So overall thoughts. Biggest disappointment for me with this release has to be the second sculpt with the hat. there's just multiple things off there, which is a huge shame given the importance of that portrait. Look, once posed up, it's not horrible, but I think it could have been so much better. But again, to reiterate, and it's something that, you know, I've talked about before, especially on this Friday's video, was third party, you just have to accept that you're not going to get perfection. And if you do, you know, you have to pay for them. There's a reason these are a little bit cheaper. But again, personally, I am happy here, especially with the importance of this property to me personally. There was no way that I was going to pass on having these characters in my collection. Would I recommend him? I think if you get the Sideshow one, I might opt for that one instead. But I made my choice, and together I think they're going to look good. The three figures are going to look good. And like I said, I did get the rest of the trio, so those reviews are coming up, and then I'll do a wrap-up video with all of them together. But for now, let me know your thoughts here, and as always, thanks for watching. And if you are enjoying the content, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, and we'll touch base on the next video.